I will be starting a series on music memorization. I do have a few videos here and there from the past on the topic, so if you'd like to check those out in the meanwhile, please go ahead and do so. They're all, I think, very helpful videos if you need some tools on, memorizing the piece that you're working on currently, or, understanding how to deepen or improve your memorization. But there are so many sides to the topic that I will be doing a series. They will be interspersed between other videos, but I have had some requests, and it's a topic I really enjoy. I like to understand, how the mind works when we're playing the violin, and memorization is sort of a key component of that. When I was young, I was required to memorize everything that I played on the violin. So I think memorization comes quite easily to me. Yet I have had a couple of experiences in the past where the memorization was a little bit challenging, mixed with stage fright, right? When you're nervous and you have something difficult to memorize, or when you have that unexpected memory slip. So I would like to discuss all facets of memorization, but today I just wanted to talk about a few, possible experiences that you may have had, that I have had or I've seen other people have. It seems to me that typically, if you're interested in the topic of memorization, it's one of these reasons. Either you are not used to memorizing and you would like to memorize, but you find it a bit challenging or new. So there's that. So it's kind of like, where do you begin, right? There's another type who maybe performs a lot, but maybe you don't feel comfortable memorizing. So you try your best to always perform something where you don't have to memorize your piece. I've seen that case a lot. I've seen also people who memorize just fine. They're pretty good at memorizing music, but they still have a bit of anxiety when it comes to performing in public from memory. And yeah, so and then there are other categories as well, but I think it's a bit tricky because even the three that I mentioned have sort of, I think I would approach. So if you were to come to me for private lessons and we were working on it together, I would definitely approach each person differently. I would treat each individual case differently. So that's the daunting thing about creating this next series. So some of the focus points may or may not be for you, but I think there's definitely going to be something valuable for you in every video. So I hope you enjoy. I hope it's helpful to you. And I have certainly dug deep into this topic myself, because I don't like to have any memory slips, and I don't like to have any chance of having memory slips. So I memorize very quickly, I memorize very easily, yet I still put myself through quite a rigorous routine every time I'm going to be performing from memory. And I have performed from memory many, many, many times. And also, I have a bit of a pet peeve when I see teachers, especially piano teachers, I'm sorry to say, that send their students out to perform in a recital without having addressed this topic of memorization hardly at all or not at all. Okay, they just think, oh, my student memorized this piece, and they never talk about actually memorizing it in a concrete manner, and they just kind of send them off, and then I think it leaves the student kind of prone to possible situations that might be a bit traumatic in the end. So many times nothing happens, right? But I have attended many student recitals at every level, like at a very high level, medium, low level, and there's always memory slips no matter what, right? And it's not just pianists, violinists, there's always a memory slip somewhere in the program. And it happens to the best of us. I've seen really amazing players have memory slips, but the difference is that they know how to kind of, manage it in the situation when that moment arises right in the middle, right? And you're on the hot spot. How do you manage it, right? So that is the difference between somebody who's experienced and someone who's not. Someone who's experienced doesn't get as anxious about memorizing and performing from memory. Someone who's experienced knows how to kind of finagle their way through a memory slip moment. And also someone with experience has a better, that memory muscle, right, is working better in their brain because they've just been doing it more than others, if that makes sense. And so simply by, doing it more, they have fewer memory slips. So I hope that makes sense. I have many approaches to memorizing in the first place. Then I have things that we do to strengthen the memorization, because I think there's like that initial step where you've got the piece memorized, but it's not like it's memorized. I would call it memorized, but it's not really solidly memorized. It hasn't really gone below the first layer of memorization, if that makes sense. And that's when things could go fine and it could go badly. It just depends, right? Like something, suddenly happens, like there's a noise in the audience, and then it just kind of triggers your brain to lose focus just for a moment, and then that streaming kind of consciousness gets interrupted, and then we have a memory slip, and then it's like just blanks out in that moment. It's a worse feeling, and then you don't, if you don't know, if you're so caught by surprise, right, then it's hard to kind of recover in the moment. So anyway, there's that second layer where we need to kind of dig deeper to the next layer and next layer of memorization, where we really kind of store it really in a concrete, reliable manner. And then there's ways to kind of test it and strengthen it and see from there. And then so there's a lot of steps that we can kind of go through. So I'd like to go ahead and do that in this series. So I'll be bringing you some examples. I'll bring them to you at different levels, like beginner music, intermediate music, advanced music. But the tricky part of this is that, like I said, the advanced players, they also can memorize music much more quickly because they've gone to music classes, right? They've done the music theory, they understand form and analysis, they understand compositional techniques, they, at a high level understand linear analysis. So if you know what linear analysis is, if you know what Schenkerian analysis is, then great, good for you. And if you've studied it, even better. But even knowing what it is, great. You are way ahead of the rest of the gang. So I use all of these techniques just naturally. I'm not sitting there with a pencil and and doing like an actual study of the score, unless it's like a very specific, very special case, okay? But most of the time I'm not. I'm just looking at it, I'm hearing the music, I'm doing all these things in my head, and they just naturally kind of all compute. They all naturally become simplified in my head, and that's why professional players can sight read very easily. We notice these patterns and these harmonic sequences, these melodic compositional techniques. We recognize them right away because we've played them so much, right? And we understand what the techniques are from the composer's point of view, and so we can almost kind of predict the next few notes because we see where they're going with it. So I hope that makes sense. It's a tough topic to talk about because I don't know where you are at, right? Each viewer is seeing this content and you're all at different places in your journey. So you may be equipped with some of this knowledge, you may not. I will try to just not worry about it and just talk to whomever I'm talking to. at the moment so that each one of you has something to glean from these videos, and I hope you find it helpful. But just for today's initial video, I do want to include just a little bit of an insight into how I memorize. Typically, I don't know if you've ever experienced that when somebody is very good at something, they're not a very good teacher at it. Like it comes so naturally to them, so they don't know how to explain it. I've seen this time and time again. I love teaching, so I notice even if it's a topic I don't know, like football or something. I'm sorry, I don't know much. I'm not a fan of football, but if I see somebody teaching even a topic I don't know, like football, I can kind of tell if they're a good teacher or not. There are just certain trademarks of a good teacher, and so I'm very observant about anytime when someone's explaining something or when someone's teaching something. And so I find that people who are good at something, right, they're not really good explaining it. And so it's tough because then, you go and you ask for advice, right? And then they'll say, oh, I just, listen to the melody and I have it, I store it in my head or something, right? So it's difficult. So hopefully music memory does come easy to me, but I also put myself through a very grueling process. And I've worked with a lot of kids from ground zero, so hopefully I can be of help to you. The way I memorize personally is I am kind of like that. I just hear a melody and I remember it. So I always say if you're able to sing it, then you're much closer to being able to play it. There's also that thing where if you hear a melody, are you able to kind of pick it out on your instrument? Are you able to go sit on the piano and figure out what keys they are? Can you tell if a melody goes upward, right? If the pitch is ascending, if the pitch is descending? Are you able, this is all ear training, right? Are you able to tell if the note is skipping upward or if the notes are skipping downward, or if it's a large leap up or a large leap down? These things help a lot, okay? So there's like that aspect, the audio part, if you're by listening to it, you can store it away into that memory, right? There's also the physical aspect. So I see this time and time again where an advanced kid, player is playing a piece and they hit a wrong note, but they use the correct finger, like it's a third finger, but they went to the other string, or they're up high and they need to shift down, right? And then they went to the wrong position, but they used the correct finger, So this is often the case. I see it a lot. I see the student is using the correct finger, but the wrong string or the wrong position. There's also the type of student who doesn't have any muscle memory hardly at all, right? It's one of their weaker memories. So they won't even remember like what their fingers are doing. Like there's a certain pattern the fingers are moving in, and they're not aware of that at all. But they have other strengths, right? There are so anyway, going back to what I was saying, I have the ability to remember the melody in my head for the most part. Even if they're intricate passages, fast notey passages, I can still remember the contour, of the line and things like that. And then also I think about, my fingers, like how are my fingers moving? I also have a very strong visual memory. So I remember all the time when I was a teenager, I could remember, where that passage was on the page. I know if I had already turned the page in my mind, if I was on the bottom of the page, in the middle of the page, so I can sort of kind of recreate that picture in my mind of the music, of the sheet music. So there's also that aspect. If you can kind of see the notes, right, in your visual memory, that also helps. And yeah, a lot of it is just like muscle memory. Same thing with my bow arm. I noticed that I'm very aware of what my bow arm is doing, and so there might be a few memory slips as far as like bowings go, but I realized that like while I'm doing it, I'm like, I'm not sure what the bowing is here, but almost like 95% of the time, I know what bowing is there. I know if it's a up, I know if it's a down, I know if there's like a slur, what the slur pattern is, like two slur, two separate, that sort of thing. So I just, that, all of that comes in, and it's like a download into my brain, and it kind of all happens all at the same time. I wish I could remember when I was younger if it was the same way. I think mostly it was the same way. I just didn't have that music theory knowledge, right, to back it up. Then the other thing is, if I find that a passage is challenging, then I think about the harmonic analysis. And so this is where I can talk about it here, but if you don't understand harmonic analysis, it may only help you a little bit, but hopefully you can pick up a few things. So like for example, many times you'll hear the main melody that's presented in a piece, and then later on it will come back again, and then later on it'll come back again, but there will be something slightly different about it. So if there's like an entire middle section where the melody comes back but the notes have changed, but it still sounds like that melody, probably we've gone into an alternate key, you know, so we have different key centers, right? So if we started out in F major, maybe in the middle section we're in C major, right? So we'll hear that same melody in C major. And so basically, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's basically that the melody was based on like one scale. Think about one of the scales you practice and you know. And then the middle section, they'll take like a different scale that maybe has different number of sharps or flats in it, right? And they're going to base the melody on that scale. And so what's the difference between hearing this familiar melody using the notes of that scale and then changing it to this scale, right? And then eventually it's like a journey. It's like a story when you read, you know, fiction, and you know, the characters are introduced in the beginning, but sooner or later there has to be something building up, some sort of conflict, some sort of climax, right, or crisis, and then there's usually some like wrapping up material at the end, right? So that's exactly how music works. It's a story, it's a development. There's characters, there's main characters and things. There are main ideas. And so you just want to, you know, understand that. And so that's why often if you have a memory slip, it happens in the middle, right, where it's very different. Suddenly you're seeing a lot of sharps and flats and naturals because the key center is changing. And that means that, again, the scale the composer is using is changing, right? And then often also the memory slips happen in the recapitulation. So that's when we're kind of closing everything up, and the familiar stuff comes back, but it's still slightly different. It's like that character, the main character, after they've been on their adventure and their journey, they're the same person, but they're not the same person. You know, hopefully their experience has deepened them, made them wiser, made them, you know, different in a good way. It has built character in them. And so it's the same person, but with like a fresh outlook on life, or a fresh, you know, perspective, or maybe they've been humbled and they've been changed, you know, for the better. So hopefully all of us, we go through experiences and they change us for the better. We learn from them, right? We grow from them, we get stronger and stuff. So it's just, it's storytelling. So if you think about it that way. Anyway, back to the memory slips. So that's when memory slips happen. I also have this thing, another little tidbit I can hopefully, you know, give to you right now in the first video is, I call it cousin spots. It's just my silly words I made up. That if there's a melody or a section that comes back again later, and it comes back again later, it could even be only one measure, like a little spot that sounds the same as something before. It just has to remind you of it. I call that a cousin spot, because anytime you have something like that, that's where the memory slips happen. All the time, memory slips happen very, very, very often in those cousin spots. So if you have a memory slip, you often need to just stop and ask yourself, what is it about this spot, right? That makes me want to play this thing next. I'm supposed to play this spot and it's supposed to have these set of notes, but I keep playing this other set of notes. And so there's usually a reason for that. So that is the gross majority of the time, it's because there was a cousin spot. So you might want to just stop and think about it. And that's why before I even teach a piece, let's say a student and I, even like beginners especially, are learning a piece together in the lesson, I always start out by saying, hey, you know, we learned this like 8 measures or something. And then I say, hey, what do you notice about the next part? And then if they just scan it, you just need to scan it with your eyes. You'll see that it looks like the first part. Okay, so then I ask them, all right, so is it exactly the same as the first part, or is it a little bit different? So do you see how even on stage 1, on day 1, we're already examining the form of the piece, right? And so we already know which areas are exactly the same and which areas are not. And then you pay attention to the differences. And so you're already ahead of the game. If you're going to memorize it, you're already aware that these spots are similar, you know. And so that's why I use like this labeling, convention where I call it A, and then if it's very similar, I call it A prime, because that's how we learn it in school as a undergrad, as a graduate student. We label them that way. If there's another difference, we call it A double prime. If there's a new section, we call it B. So there are, conventional ways to, label the form of the piece, the parts of the piece, and things like that. So I hope that helps. I'm just kind of throwing a lot of things out there for you. Hopefully it will be helpful to you. And then I want to kind of go and talk about these things more in depth and give you more examples in the future. Okay, hope you have a good day.